Hey folks, here is what I'm up to today, and let me set this up. I'm going to be shooting once again the HK45 Tactical, and specifically I'm interested in testing H&K's Recoil Management System. This is a 32-ounce pistol, and when I shoot this with the exact same load, this is 45 ACP by the way, when I shoot that exact same load in my 1911, it feels like this has less recoil, or in other words, less perceived recoil. So what I've done today is obviously I've brought out this 45, H&K 45, and I brought out a very similar 1911. It's my Springfield Armory Range Officer Champion that weighs in at 30 ounces. So only 2 ounces of difference. I'm going to be testing perceived recoil, and I'm going to be measuring recoil with the Mantis X. The third thing I'm going to do, and kind of for fun, really interested in this, is I purchased a MicroComp from HK Parts, and I'm going to install it, and I'm going to be doing some testing with the Mantis X and with just perceived recoil when I'm using that device. So that's the setup. We're going to be shooting reloads. I'm loading Hornady HAPs, very consistent load, so this test should give us a lot of good, meaningful data. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, I'd say, after shooting those two, that I feel, maybe I do feel more perceived recoil. I kind of got to think about it. And the fact that we're actually testing for it might make me think more about it. But if I had to choose one that has more felt recoil, I'd say it's this 1911 Range Officer Champion. All right, let's go ahead and install this MicroComp right here. And as you can see, this is a threaded barrel here on the HK45T. It's a left-handed thread. Takes a bit of getting used to for me. Now what I like to do is thread this on, not till it's fully tight, because it won't have the correct orientation. I mean, if we try to get it fully tight, it's going to end up like that, right? And that's not good. We want these ports here to be straight up. I'm going to turn this back, orient this, and now there's a set key on either side. We're going to go ahead and tighten it up. One on each side, try to tighten it up evenly. I've shot this before, and one thing I will note, that it does not change point of impact. I did not see it change any point of impact, so that's a good thing. You don't need it overly tight, but you do need it tight. There we have it. That is that fast, matter of seconds, even talking about it. I'm going to go ahead and take this back out and run some rounds through it. Well, now, watching those videos, you might be like, I don't see much difference, if any difference at all. And in fact, I would have to agree with you. You're really not seeing too much difference in the way the gun is recoiling and all that, even in slow motion. So some of the differences are going to be perceived differences. And I can feel the HK is recoiling less, or it seems to be recoiling less, when I'm shooting with the MicroComp installed. My son also shot these guns, and he commented the same thing. Definitely he felt that the MicroComp did reduce the perceived or felt recoil or the muzzle rise, it seemed like, and allowed him to get, and both of us, to get back on target faster. But remember, we were also using the Mantis X, and that measures recoil and recovery time and so on and so forth using the Mantis X10 recoil meter setting. And in all cases, shooting the HK45T with versus without the MicroComp, in all cases there was a reduction in muzzle rise, recoil angle, recoil width, and recovery time with the MicroComp. The most substantial reductions were seen with recoil angle and recoil width, which is actually kind of interesting because those two measures tell me that the recoil is acting a little bit more consistently when using the MicroComp, and if you want to call it a little bit more wildly when you're not using the MicroComp. But I also analyzed the difference between shooter. And it's interesting here that there's also a difference detectable with the Mantis X based on who's shooting that gun. And in fact, my son had arguably better recoil management as his muzzle rise, recoil angle, recoil width were lower than when I was shooting that same gun. However, recovery time was essentially identical. Statistically, I tested some of these same parameters, and we have to understand that we have a limited sample size. In total, I had about 40, a little bit less than 50 shots fired with all these different comparisons. And then once we start subsetting or stratifying all those samples, in other words, shooting the HK45 with versus without the MicroComp, then we're down to about 20 samples each. And if we further stratify that by who's shooting, well, we get to a point where there's really not enough samples that were measured for us to really say much about it. But where we did have probably enough or arguably enough samples, there were a few things that were statistically different with the HK45 with and without the MicroComp and so on. Now, I don't want to get too much down in the weeds with all these numbers and measures and statistics in this case. Suffice it to say that there is a perceived difference shooting the HK45T with its recoil management system versus the 1911. Similarly, there is a perceived difference shooting that HK45T with versus without the MicroComp, and the MicroComp further reduces the felt or perceived recoil. I like the MicroComp. I plan on using it a lot more, maybe not all the time when I'm shooting it, but I do like it. If you're interested, we posted a link in the description below to the MicroComp available from HK Parts. And that wraps it up for us this week. Thanks for watching.